I figured that considering I didn't want to start off with this here because it's so funny because I actually talked to a friend of mine yesterday, a really good friend of mine, and we were just talking about what was it? So he got me into Star Trek recently. Actually, no, I shouldn't say recently. In the last, I would say 2 years. And one of the things he always kept telling me is that you should watch the show. This show is ahead of its time because there's a lot of things that they delve into that's really relevant to what's going on now, among other things as well too.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, sure, I'll check it out. Then eventually I did check it out, and I feel like he made a really solid point. And then he started getting me to checking out various other spin-off shows, if you will. So to make a long story short, when we were discussing about the show, we were actually just talking about the current times right now, where I think there was this, at least as this recording, I guess the Academy of Science or whatever it was, that the guys that are in charge of the Oscars, they talked about what the criteria were that is necessary for you to be nominated for your film to be, nominated for Best Director, Best, Picture, among other things as well too. And we were just discussing about that, and I thought, those things was always there, maybe not in such a large quantity, but they've always kind of been out there sporadically throughout the years. Star Trek being a major example of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then we talked about how the films like, The Godfather, among other things too, that don't have those criteria to be met, probably would have never been nominated today, despite the fact they were very good films. But, I think people at the time didn't necessarily think of color at that point as far as, being the primary focus. So when we were discussing that, I was also prepping for what I can delve into here with you, that I was actually curious about with you, specifically with regards to, because I was listening to your music, and not to say that I thought about this here while you specifically when I was listening to your music, but I was listening to your music and I realized that there's not a single hint of any sort of Latin, influences infused into your music. It's straight up just more or less Americana style music, country music, if you will. And to be honest with you, I actually quite appreciated that as well when I was listening to your songs. And there's actually 3 tracks that I'm going to point out here with it. I really did enjoy. One was the only If Only for a Moment, The Fix, and then Beautiful Ride. I will say though that the Fix, on the other hand, I felt like possibly had the most Latin element, if you will, with the trumpet that plays in the song. But I don't know if that was intentional or not. But I thought that was interesting. But that being said, though, I was actually just curious about how, for you, you've talked before in the past about growing up. You've actually had you were on your cousin's podcast, I think about a year ago, if I recall correctly, where you briefly discussed about what it was like for you growing up, and especially when you went to Argentina, because that's where you originally were born, and how you felt the distinct differences for yourself, knowing that you were more American than you were Argentinian, if you will. But I was also curious about your more or less some of the other areas in your life growing up, about how when you went back to Argentina, if there was any sort of resistance you've ever met at all at any point because you were more Americanized than you were, Latin, if you will. But at the same time, coming back from all that, and then you're coming back here, I don't know if you've experienced any sort of resistance from other people that, well, you're Latino, or Latina rather. I'm not sure if that was a constant struggle for you, because from my experience for myself personally, because of the way that I look, I got passed on being white. So being Hispanic wasn't necessarily a major thing, except for the inner circles that I've had with friends and family, that I've dealt with more prejudice in that sense than I would with other people that were not more or less in that inner circle, if you will. But I was curious about what that was like for you growing up. And I'm sure there's some things that there have been some positive outlooks from your perspective about how you grew up. But I was just wondering about what it was also like for you that more or less helped influence the decisions you make as far as your comedy, your music, and everything else that you do, that what your experiences that led you to more or less become the person that you are because of certain perspective you had growing up, considering your background and where you grew up here. Because in most cases, some people tend to associate Latinos with, California or parts of the East Coast, especially New York, and in parts of the South as well too, mainly with Florida and parts of Texas as well. But Midwest is a very rare thing to come across with that being a part of the culture, if you will, from people of that background. But not to make it a political or a stigmatic talking point here, but I am curious about that for yourself, what it was like for you before we get into the fun stuff, if you will.
I would say so many things came through my head while you were just going through that. And an interesting observation about I would say the album that you're referring to was an album I recorded about a decade ago. And it was my first
another good mistake.
Yep, another good
Yeah.
mistake. And I recorded that with, I didn't write all of those songs. I co-wrote those songs with Mark Hauptshine, who produced and owns all of the intellectual property for that album. So a lot of someone else's flavor and a lot of someone else's stylings and perspective came through. He's a really phenomenal musician and he has a really great ear for detail. So you probably noticed that. I mean, like there's some really intricate musical
Yeah,
decisions that
I
took
agree.
place in
Yeah.
that album. It's a beautifully well done album.
Mhm.
I would say it probably didn't exactly, I mean, of course, it didn't have any Hispanic flair. It was written by a Jewish American man. So that's probably a big part of it. But even one step before that, I had just finished my undergraduate degree about 5 years prior to that album. And in my undergraduate degree, I studied opera. And I will say the formation of my voice as a singer, as a musician, and also just as a performer is very much steeped in my Hispanic and my Latin culture. And in particular, just like the training of my voice as a classical singer, far before I started releasing folk albums and started playing music and writing folk music and acoustic Americana music, very much had a lot of influence from Spanish opera singers that had very similar colors. And I studied Italian and French and German and Czech classical music. And a lot of the technique that I started building with my voice came from that, very much from that. And so everything that I do with music, yeah, I'm an American. I've been in the United States now for over 30 years.
Right.
So my influence, and if you listen to the podcast with my cousin William Venturelli, which is an amazing podcast and everybody should listen to it. We talked a bit about like the identity crisis that immigrants have here. And, to your point, what you said is the Midwest isn't known for being Hispanic, but I live in Detroit, a city that is 80% Black. There's a lot of Hispanics in Michigan, and in particular, where I grew up in Southeast Michigan, lots of Mexicans, lots of Brazilians from South America, a lot of Central Americans, Cubans, Puerto Ricans, a lot of Hispanics. But yeah, I mean, it's not California and Florida, but a lot of Hispanics making the world go around here. So certainly quite a bit of influence, but yeah, not a predominant culture. I mean, to answer your question about how it impacted me growing up, I think when I was really young, when you are learning English and like you're the only Hispanic person in your classroom, when you're 7 years old, you might be embarrassed about it. You're like embarrassed about, the weird food you're bringing to lunch, and you just want nothing more than to feel normal. And then when you get to being where we are today, and I would say even more so today than any other time in history, it's like differentiate yourself. And then I start, working through that with stand-up comedy, where it presents a new and exciting opportunity to find your authentic voice in being Hispanic, as opposed to like leaning on being Hispanic. Like being Hispanic is the least interesting thing about me. It just happens to be a part of the fabric of that makes me who I am. So like trying to navigate, I talk about that a bit on stage, where I like talk about like the dichotomy of being an immigrant, being like American, but also like remembering what it's like to have nothing, which I don't think you have to be an immigrant to understand either side of those things. It does play a factor, but I am like my whole goal in my comedy career and in my life is to continue finding my genuine authentic voice and not talk about being Hispanic just because it's like a thing that's interesting about me, but also making it very much about how that impacts the way I look at the world, or like see the world and digest what's happening around me, instead of just, I'm Hispanic.
Do you feel like though, because I was it's kind of it's odd for me to bring it up now as a starting point of the conversation, but I'm just curious to hear from a different perspective from somebody else outside of friends and families, if you will. But do you because I know what you mean by that, and I do agree with you 100% about that the Hispanic part of my life is just the fabric of who I am. It's not actually me, if that makes any sense. But I'm just curious about how, because I always figured that, the grand narrative with a lot of things that's going on right now, especially with this whole culture shift, which I'm all for at the same time. So I'm not trying to give the impression that I'm not, but the culture shift that we're experiencing now about the matter of representation being a very important thing, which I am for, but I always figured that it's more of a task rather than an actual organic, just, proper, hey, let's just share these stories we've never heard before, because let's see if they're interesting to tell, and then, tell something that's really good rather than let's just tell a story of a Hispanic family, but the film sucks. But the important is we just told the story. That's the part that I have a problem with here, with that I'm starting to notice as a thing, at least from my perspective. So I'm not sure if that for you, if that's something that is a thing that, because I feel like, I guess for my perspective, because I'm in a field right now where at least for this hobby that I'm pursuing here, is that I see more of that in the field, where I don't necessarily do interviews with people promoting their films, but I do talk with people about their work, but try to avoid the subject matter of race, if you will. I've done it heavily before in the past, and then I realized that it was becoming too much of a talking point rather than, just enjoying the conversation, if you will. Not that they were not enjoyable before. But for yourself, though, do you feel like that's something that is more of, for example, like if you go and perform somewhere, I don't think that from your experience, at least from what I'm seeing on your posts on social media, there's never a talking point of Hispanic comedian Camila. I always fuck up your last name, Barrio, right? Is that how you pronounce it?
It's actually Ballario.
Ballario. Okay, I always figured the two L's were actually Barrio.
It's okay.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I messed up.
It's okay.
So, but there's never that a representation of like this Hispanic comedian. It's just your name, and then you're doing your thing, you're performing, and that to me is the important factor. So for me to reach out to you wasn't because you're Hispanic, I want to talk to you. It wasn't that. But I'm curious about if there was ever at any point that was the selling point. Hey, you're Hispanic. Can we use that to promote the show for you because you're going to be on the performance? Was there ever any concerns with that at all? That was going to be something that was going to be a major factor for them to be the selling point rather than focusing on you as the individual, as the artist, if you will?
As a stand-up comic, I've been doing comedy for 6 years now, but as a musician prior to that, I've been performing for decades. I don't shy away from it. Like it's also similar to being a woman in comedy. Like when people put together a show of female comedians, I mean, yes and no. There's like a certain aspect of me that's like, don't treat me like I'm just Hispanic. I'm actually just a comedian, but also celebrate the fact that, like, to answer your question in short, I wholly embrace and will be on a show with all Hispanics. In fact, that never happens. I worked with a Hispanic headliner a month or two ago in Chicago at the Comedy Bar. And I was so excited. I was like, wow, it's so awesome that there's two Hispanic people. Like I was featuring for him and we were running the show. It was kind of cool because it's not every day that you have a couple Hispanics on a show. One step even behind that, it's like being Hispanic, but also being an immigrant in the United States gives you a lens. You see the world a little differently. You see the world through the lens of, what you've experienced. I've seen a third world country. I know my family in Argentina. They live a very different life than I live. I remember the life that we lived before we moved here. I experienced life through this lens. And so it's less about don't treat me differently and more about give me more opportunities to share my perspective, because I think more people probably can identify with this. And that's all that stand-up comedy and music is sharing your perspective and your lens and hoping that maybe it reaches one person that identifies as well. And also like finding the comedy behind it all as well. I do talk about being Hispanic on stage. I have it in my bio, Argentine American. I don't say I'm I don't ever say I'm a female comedian. I don't ever say I'm an American comedian. I don't say I'm a Hispanic, Latina. Like I'm a bunch of different, I'm all these things. And I don't anchor on it, but I don't shy away from it as if like, I'm not trying to get people to know that that's what it is, because I think that would have been me when I was 6 years old, afraid to be who I am. But the more you do comedy, the more you realize being exact only who you are is going to get you to the next level, and the same goes for music as well.
What actually, as I'm going to quickly shift gears real quickly for you on something. When you started to put the album together, I know that you mentioned before that it was written by somebody else. You co-wrote some of the songs as well too, but were you at any point ever tempted to put a little bit of that influence in there? Hey, I got an idea for this part of the song that I thought we can probably infuse a little bit of this kind of flavor, if you will, whether it be for a Latin flavor or whatever the case may be, because I'm not sure how much input you had apart from the co-writing aspect of it, but if it's something that you have gotten influences for various things in your life, I'm wondering what influence you did have overall with the record, because when I had heard that, I honestly assumed that a lot of it was heavily influenced by you because of where you grew up in the Midwest. You had more of the country vibes, if you will, that I figured that was part of your upbringing, if you will, which is why I assumed that you wrote the songs came out the way that they did. But again, I'm not sure how much influence you actually had over the overall record to do so, because if you had the ability to make some changes, I'm not saying the record is bad because it's actually quite good, but if you had the ability to make some changes there, would you have done something a little bit more differently, drastically, that would have been completely different from what we got in the album, or would it be consistent with all that?
God, I haven't thought about this album in this depth in a very long time, because I just don't think about it. It's so old in my mind now.
Right.
You might have seen, if you looked on Spotify, that I released a song about 2 years ago in April called Ghost Town, and it's a song that I wrote myself.
I actually like that song. It was a good one.
I love country music. I've always loved Americana music, and I've always, as a songwriter, I've always written Americana, country, folk inspired music. In Argentina, there's a styling of music called chamamé, which is the folklore of the people indigenous to Argentina. And so just there's something about folk music, and it's not necessarily a styling, but there's something about folk music that draws me to it, because it's a very it's an approachable form, right? It's like most people, if they're willing to listen to it, realize that it's just like they're simple songs about simple concepts that might be deeper, might not. So I'll start with that, saying like that's very much my style of music. But I'll also say that album in particular, I was actually hired on as a studio musician to record Mark's album. Like really early on in the process. We met at an art show once. His wife is an artist. My mom is an artist and an art professor and has been painting for years. We met and he was like, "Hey, I have some songs I've been wanting someone to sing. And just like get those recorded. Do you have any interest in being a studio musician?" And when I finished my undergraduate degree, I always thought, yeah, voiceover acting, studio musician, like I should just do that. That should be my living. So I recorded, I think, like one song for the album, and it became very clear that it needed to just be my album, that it wasn't like me being a studio recording. Because it turned into something much bigger than I think the original intention. And then it turned into a 2-year project of like, hey, I have this song, let's make it yours. And so it was very, very much a partnership. I don't think I have writing credits on this album. I don't really care anymore. I think at the time I was like, I should have writing credits. I feel like I wrote I influenced the direction of this album in so many ways. But at the same time, it's not like I was like, okay, great, learning experience. We did this. It was a 2-year project with someone that I like really cared about. I loved this. I love Mark Hauptshine. And we worked together and it was a great experience, but it wasn't like, someone gave me, $250,000 to put an album together, write the music and put it out like in the way that you would hope that you would get an album. It was more like, hey, will you be a studio musician for me? Wow, that went really well. I'm changing my mind. I think I want to sign you and I want to start a record label and I want you to be the artist on this album. And so that's how that happened. He started a record label, produced the full album, funded the whole thing. And it went there. So, that's kind of the history, but it was an interesting and a different approach than I think a lot of people typically take. Do
you actually go back to listen to some of the songs? I'm sure you play them from time. No. Okay. Why not for you? I just, I don't know. Have you recorded an album before? I feel like I listened.
Yeah. I can't listen to it anymore. I've listened to those songs how many times? Like hundreds of thousands of hours on those songs. So I mean, Ghost Town, I would say, is a little bit more recent and like a little closer to my heart because it's more recent. A lot changes between when you're 25 and you're 35. So a lot's changed between then and now. And I would say like I like Ghost Town, but I love that song, but I don't like listening to it on like Spotify or anything.
So this is interesting because I talked to filmmakers as well too, and I asked this question a lot with it, but I never really thought about it with musicians in this capacity. But with filmmakers, especially with actors, there's a common theme where they do the film, they see it once, and they move on.
Yeah.
Right? Musicians, on the other hand, don't necessarily have that kind of leeway when it comes to that. You have to play it all. I mean, especially if that's a full-time gig, you're constantly playing the songs, and I can understand that after the millionth time you play, it's very tiring. That you don't think much of it at that point. But but there are some people out there that listen to their own music and that this is. I remember, I think it was an actor by the name of Johnny Strong, if I recall correctly. He's like, I don't listen to anything else, but I listen to my music. That's a very rare thing for me to hear someone say that, especially when they're writing, creating their own stuff, and that's what they prefer to listen to. I'm not saying that's a conceited thing to say, but
sure.
But I'm just curious about when you start playing your music, how you kind of balance, how you figure that out to remove yourself and then just play it and hopefully get people to be invested in showcasing your enthusiasm for the songs, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I also think it has something to do with long form art versus short form art. So now that I dedicate like 100% of my time to stand up, because in my stand up, I'm able to not only just be me, speak for my own voice, write songs, perform the songs as well. I find that when in stand-up comedy and then on social media, which you saw, like you have to keep building and sharing.
Right.
If you're not building and sharing content, like you need that in order to build your brand and to build your following.
Right.
I find myself, I'm able to listen to a 20-second clip. No problem. I don't roll my eyes, but it's funny because I just recorded my first ever comedy album in April, and it's a full length special. So it's a full album length. So we're editing the album, we're editing the video, the special itself. And I have been doing a lot of this material for so long to get ready for this special that as I'm editing, it's almost hilarious how like little emotion I have for these jokes that are supposed to be funny. I like look at a full 40. It's so funny because my fiance, he comes to so many of my shows and he's helped me build this material. And we both sit there editing it like it's like we're looking at a gymnastics, like show, like we're so intense about it. And I'm like, neither of us have smiled for an hour. And this is a comedy special. So it's funny because you look at your work so differently than right. I think the intention for the audience. But yeah, so that's like a more recent take on, do I like watching myself? No, if I have to watch my special one more time, I probably will have to watch it one more time. But like after it's out, I'm just like not looking at it anymore. I'm just done.
It's, it's really interesting. I know what you mean. And believe me, I truly do understand that perspective as well. But I guess my question with you is because I know you mentioned before that you would like to make a living doing this here, because I believe you're still working full time and you have the ability to kind of you do this on the side given your schedule here. But it's interesting for me to hear someone that says that I love this field, if you will, like in this case comedy, films, whatever the case may be, but they love the field so much, and then there are a handful of people out there who just don't want to revisit their work, despite the fact they love the process, they love the results, but they don't want to see the results more than once. And I understand how tedious it is. Believe me, I get all that. But I guess for someone like myself, because when I edit the videos here, I get a kick out of watching them. And I was funny because I was talking to somebody, I was talking to a guest whose episode hasn't aired just yet, but I was talking to Natalia about this, where I said, one thing I realized about myself that I didn't catch on until later on, I guess, as I was doing this, it was that I actually enjoyed watching myself, not from a conceited standpoint, but just more in a sense, like I enjoyed the fact that I'm seeing myself enjoying what I'm doing, and I'm enjoying the back and forth in the conversation, or I'm enjoying the skits that I either put together or the promos that I'm putting together on my social media posts for whatever it is I'm going to be doing. Like I enjoy that aspect of it where it's fun for me that I want to go back here and continue with that because I enjoy what I'm seeing being put together here. I'm sure if I was a filmmaker and I edit the film a million times, maybe my perspective will change a little bit here. But I'm curious about, if maybe it's an unfair question to ask you, but when you're doing it, I'm sure you do it because you love it. But then when you watch yourself doing it, is the passion still not there at that moment when you watch yourself, doing something you love doing? I hope that question makes sense.
I think like when you work, because stand-up comedy is not improv, right? It's you work at something and you know how it should be done. And so when I'm watching myself do stand-up, I'm doing it because I've been working so hard on building this body of work, like this special. And it's hard not, especially like so close to it, it's hard not to look at it and think, oh, how, because you are always changing, you're always improving. It's hard not to look at it and to say, oh, I could have done that better, or I could have switched that around. And it's almost like letting it rest, like let it be what it was. Let the special just be the special. You'll always probably be able to improve those jokes. You'll probably but I think like at a certain point, you start looking at it too objective or like too subjectively and start thinking through like the little things too, so much that you can't enjoy it.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I see it now.
I also think like I'd be capable of watching it by myself, probably enjoying it. No, I mean, if I went into it with the goal of like, don't judge it, just watch it. Sure, I could watch it. No, it wouldn't be painful. I just probably would be like, what's the point of watching this if I'm not going to be if I'm not going to like be figuring out how to improve? It's just really hard to take a step out of that because that's always what I do. I record, I watch, I improve, I record, I listen, I improve. I like figure out how to trim the fat. Like that's always what I'm looking for with stand up. So
what's one thing about yourself that you think, in terms of how you're putting things together whether it be with your music, your stand-up, that you've noticed before has changed a great deal, that you felt like has been a major improvement that maybe tighten your skills, if you will? Because I've listened to the few stand-up clips I've been able to come across on your channel and whatever else I could come across on social media. It seems like it's gotten a lot better. There's one that I remember you had done from, I think it was back in Ohio, Toledo, if I recall correctly, for the Man Cave, I think is what it was. And there was quite a few jokes that you had said there, which I think the set was like 20 minutes long, if I remember correctly, but it was quite good. When I'm thinking about some of the other ones I've come across as well too, where you can see that the material is still being put together, but obviously there's you mentioned before about it, you have to keep fine tuning those details and cutting out the fat, if you will. But I'm wondering if there's a particular process that you realized that had made you become better at this art form, if you will, that made you realize that not only have I gotten better with it, but I know I'm actually really good at it at this point.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, social media has forced me to watch myself. Mm-hmm. Typically, like if reels weren't important and there was some other way to build a following, I don't know what that would be. But if there was, I wouldn't be doing it. And I probably wouldn't benefit from it as much as I have, because like when you have to do like a tight 20-second reel and listen to it, and it's music too, because before I was doing reels for stand-up comedy, I was doing it for music. It forced me to like play a song a million times. And then the next time I would do a gig, I would be like, wow, this song just feels like home. I did this song for 5 hours just to record a 1-minute clip. And so I would say like twofold, taking reels a bit more seriously and like learning how to really produce a short reel. And I'm getting better at it. I'm by no means like I'm self-teaching myself how to get these moving forward, but I've gotten them to a point where they're starting to look better and look a bit more polished every time. And the editing process is getting quicker. So it's forced me to like tighten up jokes because, sometimes a joke might be a minute long and then you're like, wow, I really could have trimmed out, 40 seconds of this joke. 10 seconds was all the necessary. And I probably could have added an extra tag or a punchline that wasn't said there. So like really taking the production aspect of it has made me better. And then also just with everything else, it's just confidence that comes with it. I've been doing stand up now for 6 years, and I just recorded my first special. And I remember looking at my comedy, like thinking through planning out my future, thinking like, when will I get to a point where an hour feels like a good amount of time? And I'm finally at the place where I'm like, if I have to do less than 30 minutes, it's just not enough time. Like any set that's 5 minutes, 10 minutes long is just like, I may as well just introduce myself and then get off stage because it feels very fast. And so now I'm just like leaning into that. But I also think social media helped with like confidence, because I didn't know that 300,000 people would like this 20-second joke of mine. And so it's kind of cool to see what works, what doesn't in that medium, right? It doesn't always work on stage, but it might work well in that medium. So it's just another way of engaging with people and doing what I love, is making people laugh, hopefully.
Do you think though that you've gotten better with the material that you're coming up with and seeing the because I'm not sure what your measure, what the metric system is for you, about how you can determine that things are going, are people responding to it? Obviously, from being at a show, if you get a good laugh, obviously that's your indicator. But apart from that, like, do you feel like there has been a momentum for you where you realize that things are going really good for me right now, where I know for a fact I'm getting better? If I continue with this here, it'll keep getting better from here, because the business is a very fickle thing. I'm sure people already know that, but but from your own personal perspective, do you feel like that things are moving along a little more quickly than usual, or is it still a very slow momentum process here for you?
Depends. It ebbs and flows. Applying and getting into festivals has been like another form of understanding, like, okay, it's not just me. Someone else saw this clip and thought, oh, that clip was good enough to get into this festival with these really great headliners, and like get more exposure. I think like exposure is really the trick. I think it's really just work ethic. I don't do stand up because I'm a perfectionist, because I'm just not a perfectionist in any aspect of my life. I never have been. I've always thought progress is better than really any perfection that you could ever want. I'm a very hard worker. So if I want something and I'm not getting it right now, it's just like me going to the gym. I go to the gym 6 days a week. I am like usually I do CrossFit, so it's very competitive. It always feels like I'm very humbled every single time. But that's kind of like the nature of it, because I know, and I don't care, because I know I'm going to show up every day. And that's how I feel about stand up too. It's like, yeah, I'm not going to be I don't want to be the funniest person in the room. I want everybody in the room to be funny, because if I'm in a room where everybody's funny, I know I've made it, because I'm surrounding myself with good comedians. And that's what I like. I want to be at the level where everybody's funny around me, and it feels like fulfilling. Like for me, I just want to enjoy what I do, which is writing, music, writing, jokes, connecting with people, making people feel seen and heard, which I love doing, and enjoying the process. The process is comedy. There's no real end game that you can attain today that's going to make you feel better. You just have to enjoy the process.
Do you, when you're performing your songs and you're doing stand up, what do you get the most satisfaction out of doing each of those art forms, if you will? Do you get more from the comedy, or do you get more from playing music?
Probably the comedy. I don't know. I think that so music, if you think about it and compare it to like something like musical theater, I think I have said this on a podcast before. I don't remember when, but in a musical and in an opera and like any kind of acted out form with music, there's a reason that it's a song and not a word, right? And so that's how
your cousin's podcast you've said this.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
I approach it very much that way. It's like, if it's a concept that I just don't think is going to play in words, but would be hilarious as a song. Like I have a song about my exes. I don't think you've seen it, because I don't think I've posted it anywhere, but it's in my special. It would just sound mean if I spoke for 5 minutes and like roasted my ex-boyfriends. But in a song, like it just takes on a new life, and it's not so serious, because it doesn't have to be so serious. And so actually it's not like, do I like the straight stand-up aspect or the music? It's more what I enjoy is when I wrote something that I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I was trying to say. Or like, that I find that hilarious. I'm glad I was able to put that into words.
Interesting. So you find with the musical side of it here, it gives you a different outlet to express something that probably wouldn't come off as harsh as it would.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's not even just like harsh. It's just stand-up comedy is how do you make something that someone else is going to relate to be funny? And if you can't do it in words, but you can do it in a song and you have the ability to, then do it.
What's
it's not going to work for everyone, but
right. But what's the least likely form, either inspiration or something that has helped influence, in this case, let's say stand up, where you probably did not expect to get some sort of influence that made you become better at this craft, if you will?
So you mean like a person, or
it could be anything? It can literally be anything. It could be a song you may have heard, but something that you just did not expect to have a major influence on you, that you realize that you use whatever the influence you've gotten from that probably helped you become better at songwriting or stand up or you're singing, whatever the case may be.
Man, that's a really good question that I would probably have to think about. And when we're probably done talking, I'll think about, there's that. But I'll say a broad sweeping statement that plays with music and with stand-up is that I think like some people might be afraid to write a song or to say a joke that seems like too simple to be good, or like too simple that you feel like you need to bake it a bit more. And I found that sometimes the simplest songs with the simplest chords and the simplest concept and the jokes that you find are stupid, but you tell your friends all the time because it always makes them laugh, that those are the things that you should be saying on stage. And I think like for me, the learning experience was to not overthink it. And that sometimes the funniest thing is right in front of you. Like you don't have to wait until you have like your opus to have a funny joke.
Right.
And that it shouldn't be don't think too much about it. Just like do it. If you think that it would be funny, try to write that song. Chances are you're going to find something that's funny in there. And you should try it.
What's actually the one thing that you going through your experience with your stand-up here for 6 years, what has changed for you as far as what you liked about it, and what has changed about what you didn't like, or what you don't like about it now, that's that maybe you have, because you're getting deeper into this this career path, if you will. I'm wondering if anything has changed for you about your perspective on how the comedy scene is, that you maybe didn't think much of at the time, but now that you're more deeper into it, your perception may have changed a little bit, that you realize that if I could avoid this, I would do it, but I have to go through this here in order for me to continue down this path. So curious about what would have been that sticking point for you.
I mean, I think like it's funny when you were saying that, I'm like, what I don't like about it is that I'm not like just doing it full time. And so I think to answer your question, when I started doing comedy, I just knew that I needed a place to perform the stuff that I'd already been writing, because I'd been writing premises for jokes for so long. I've been writing songs for so long. And I just realized one day, like, enough's enough. You just have to start performing it. And I really didn't have high expectations of it. I was more like, just do it because you have to, kind of the same way I think about music. And I don't think I knew when I first started stand up, though it became evident, like the more I did it, that it would just be the thing that I should be doing. And so, I'm like, for me, the next step is figuring out how I can get a manager, an agent, like, so I can start doing more. And it's hard to do when you also, I mean, I do stand up like 5 times a week, at least, typically. So I do about as much as a lot of comedians that I know that do it full time, and I still have a full time day job, and I enjoy both careers greatly. I mean, I have an MBA. I mean, I work really hard in all aspects of my life, and I wouldn't have it any other way. But I want more. I just want more stand up. I want more opportunities. If the opportunities are there, I want them. And I don't think I expected that. It's like, join like a softball league in your 30s and expect to be like, oh my God, softball is my sport. I need to do this. I need to take this to the max, and I think that's kind of what happened to me. I'm like, oh my God, I need to do this. I need to figure it out. So I don't know if it will probably play into us having to move at some point from Detroit to another city, or if I can figure it out here, but I'm down to figure it out.
Going back real quick to your singing here, because you really do have a beautiful voice when it comes to your singing. You're welcome. But I was curious if that's something that was very natural for you, or if you had to work hard to be able to develop it and then maintain it. Because I'm not sure if you're one of those people that doesn't necessarily have to warm up. You can just go on stage and drop a note and take it from there, or do you have to really prepare before you go out there, before you start, using your vocals, if you will?
I work really hard. But my voice, I've always had. Like, it was like just God-given. I mean, I've always been able to sing. I've been able to sing since I could speak. I think I had my first musical that I was in when I was in the 5th grade. And I did musical theater from the 5th grade through after I graduated from undergrad. So like, I've been performing and singing my whole life because it's the most natural way for me to emote. And it just feels like it's something I have to be doing. And in fact, when I don't play music and I don't sing, I just don't feel well. I'm not myself. And so it is very much like, I hate to say I don't work hard for it, because I really work hard to sing and to maintain and to lead a healthy life so I can sing.
Right.
But it is very much like God-given. I didn't decide one day I want to sing and I had a shitty voice. Like, no, I had a voice and it was always a part of me. I've always played the guitar and sung. Stand-up wise, I can just get on stage and not warm up. I can get off an airplane and do it. I don't take the singing aspect of stand-up as seriously. It's funny because like but I will also say, like, but when I was singing classical music, absolutely, I could not get on stage without warming up. Like, classical voice is so different that it's like not stretching before a workout. It's like not possible. You have to warm up for classical opera, especially. You have to have stamina. I couldn't sing opera today if I wanted to. I would have to warm up for like 3 weeks and then maybe sing a song. So it's a very different ball of wax.
There's something about, because I want to stick on the subject matter of your singing here, because I actually came across a few of your videos here where you've done cover songs. You've done Tennessee Whiskey, which I actually really liked, by the way.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And then
you're surprised you liked it.
Why people didn't like it? You've come across?
No, you said I really liked it.
I see what you're saying.
I was not planning to like it.
Well, because when I saw that it was a cover, that song it's such a distinct song, and Chris Stapleton's voice is it's perfect for the song. So anyone else is trying to attempt to cover it, because I think I've heard one other cover that I did not like.
By the way, he's covering it. It's not his song.
Oh, that's right. You're right. But the way that he sang it,
I
know what you said. Yeah,
He's
you're 100%. I completely forgot about it. You're right. Yeah. But the way that he sang it, so basically.
No, I agree. I'm a huge Chris Stapleton fan.
Right, and especially when he did the national anthem for the Super Bowl, I was like, it's that and
Epic.
Whitney Houston that just set the standard at that point.
Enough said. Yeah, I agree.
So when I heard him sing, Tennessee Whiskey, I was like, that song is like, that's his song.
Yeah, nobody else should ever sing it again.
Right, and it's similar to what Johnny Cash did, Hurt, which is a 9 Inch Nail cover song. And once he did that song, I was like, that song belongs to him now. But the point I'm getting is I've heard someone else do that cover as well, and I thought that wasn't very good. So when I saw that, I was like, and I've heard the songs previous to that one too, but I was just a little hesitant. When I heard it, I was actually quite surprised how good it was. So and I'm being honest with you on that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And then I actually did like the because I've heard the Hallelujah covers so many times. There's only handfuls that actually stick out.
I love singing that song.
Right, and I could tell when I saw the video too. But that song I actually quite enjoyed. Now the other song I came across that I did not, I was familiar with the song, but I hadn't heard it, I guess, in some time, that I kind of forgot until I heard you sing it, which was "Rather Be," which is the Clean Bandit song. I actually like that version too. And you didn't play the guitar, which I was actually kind of surprised with that one as well.
Yeah, I went through an era of not playing the guitar and just being the singer long time ago. And then I stopped posting stuff. You'll probably notice if you go to my YouTube page to try to engage with me, you'll notice that I don't post very much on YouTube.
Yeah.
That is something that needs to change over time. I've just kind of taken to short form Instagram, and I need to get on shorts, and I need to do a bit more on my Twitter. But yeah, I'm not engaging as much on YouTube because stand up, it's like if I give you my long clips, like I can't release my special. Like I want to release my special on YouTube. And I haven't really been doing like the short form on YouTube, if that makes sense. So to answer your question, I used to love doing like fully produced covers for my YouTube. And I kind of stopped doing that and started doing covers on my Instagram. If you go on my Instagram account, you'll see like tons of full length covers, which I will say, labor of love. That's one of my favorite things to do is just record a cover. I love covers.
What's your favorite cover that you sang that sticks out for you?
That's tough. I love singing pretty much anything by Chris Stapleton or Brandi Carlile. Patty Griffin, probably Heavenly Day. Do you know who Patty Griffin is?
I know who she is. I don't think I've heard that song.
It's a very good song.
Okay.
One of my favorite songs to sing live. I'm trying to think. There's this one that I used to sing all the time. I can't remember off the top of my head. I'd have to look it up.
While you're doing that, what's actually a song or an album that you've heard and you've thought to yourself, I wish I wrote that?
Literally anything Brandi Carlile written, like her last two albums less so, but any early Brandi Carlile.
Okay.
I've always felt like that's my song. But there's a song that the Avett Brothers sing that Brandi Carlile also covers. What is it called? Say my name. Avett Brother. I can't remember the name of the song, but that song, it's one of my favorite songs to sing, and because it's just like simple, clean, and it just feels like a song that you should have wrote.
Brothers. I'm trying to think of the song now. You may be talking about. Do you have a favorite song, by the way?
No, of course not.
Or a favorite album, at least?
Murder in the City. That's what the song is called.
That's from the Avett Brothers? That's the one you're
Avett Brothers. Yeah, Avett Brothers wrote this song, and Brandi Carlile covered it on her album. There's a song that Susan Tedeschi. I mean, she's just got like one of the most Tedeschi Trucks. It's a band.
I've heard of the band, yeah, but I'm not sure if I heard. I'm not familiar with Susan Tedeschi.
She's the lead singer, and she's like got one of the most soulful, classic, epic voices of all time. And they have a live album that was a CD in my car, and I don't have a CD player anymore. And I don't really have a favorite album, but for me, if I can listen to your album top to bottom without skipping any songs and enjoy the whole thing and keep going back to it, that's a good album. And that's how I feel about most of Tedeschi Trucks and anything Susan Tedeschi sings.
What's actually a song or an album that you heard that you probably would more or less be not more of your consistent catalog of music you would listen to that caught you by surprise, that's part of your more or less your playlist, if you will, like that would be considered surprising to a lot of people that know you and say you actually listen to that, considering the type of music you probably listen to?
Probably Billie Eilish. I don't really listen to any music regularly or anyone's albums regularly, but I think like when I didn't expect myself to enjoy her music, and she's just got such a cool voice.
Yeah.
I was very surprised because her aesthetic and like her style doesn't at all show like this angelic, clean voice that she has.
Right.
Beautiful voice that she has. So very surprised that I liked her. And then not surprised after a while. I'm like, no, of course she has a beautiful, amazing voice. She's extremely talented. I don't know if nobody's ever asked me that question before. Anything that I like that there's this new song that I listen to all the time. that nobody knows. It's called Lizzo by Moonwalker. If you like
The name
hip
of the song is
hop,
called Lizzo by Moonwalker.
Lizzo is the name of the song. Lizzo
Okay.
by Moone Walker. This is, you'll be surprised that I like this song, but
Okay.
it's explicit
Well, what
and
kind of
it's
style of music is this music?
like hip
The
hop
song.
rap.
Oh, okay. That's considered to be
Um,
out of your repertoire of music you listen to?
I mean, like, I listen to hip hop, I listen to rap, but this is kind of like a lesser known song that I just latched onto and I love. It's
Mhm.
like his one hit. I mean, he's kind of a new artist in the scene. I
Mhm.
don't love his other songs, but this song I could listen to it on when I first started listening to this. It's probably been my most played song of this year. When Spotify tells me it's going to be like Lizzo by Moonwalker and then like Brandy Carlisle and the Avett Brothers, like it's going to make zero sense. But it's just a good, and I'll show this song to anyone who will listen. It's so good, and the lyrics are awesome.
I'll listen to it. I'm curious to see how
Yeah.
what about this song appeals here to you? What do you have is there like a, because I'm sure you like this as well, to just based on with what you're telling me, where you listen to something, you're just latching onto it. But is there a song that you either grew up listening, or maybe it's a song you've kind of come
Mhm.
across as a recent, and it could be a song from the past, recent. I mean, you mentioned Lizzo, the song Lizzo, but I guess I'm just being more specific about a particular type of song that stuck with you, that no matter where you go, if someone plays it, it has your attention no matter what. I mean, you kind of hinted before about the various songs you come across it, but I'm just wondering if there's that one song that would be on the top of the list for you that you definitely would consider as more or less like one of the best you've ever heard of, if that.
Oh, geez. I was thinking through, like, as you were saying that, I was thinking of what are songs that, at no matter what part of my life, I will always love and listen to. But I don't know. I think about some of my most classically loved songs. There's a singer from Argentina called Mercedes Sosa. Have you ever heard of Mercedes Sosa?
I don't think so.
She passed, I don't know, a while ago. But she sang a song called Gracias a la Vida, which means thank you to life.
Right.
And it is one of the most, well, I don't even know if she wrote it or if it's a cover that, or she sang for someone else, but she's like Argentina's sweetheart.
So she's like the
Let's
Celine
see.
Dion of Argentina.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Very well put.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's not written, but she co-wrote it with
Okay.
Juan Baez, I feel like. I can't
Okay.
remember exactly who, but it's an amazing song that when I sing it, I cry. I can't help but cry. It's like
Mm.
always been a song that my family loves. We had a family friend that actually played. He is an amazing guitarist, and he played the song with Mercedes Sosa in Argentina once, and he was her
Mm.
guitarist for quite some time. And just so songs like that hold a very close place in my heart. A lot of Argentine folklore songs do. And like I said, I wish you would ask me these questions in an email so I could actually think about it, because I love music so
Well,
much,
these are
and
just
there's
off
so
the cuff
many.
questions, so I
Yeah,
apologize
so
for
like
that.
I haven't been asked these questions in a long time, so I can't think of like,
Yeah.
I'm thinking through musicians that I love. There's a new musician that I just started listening to that I think she's gonna be famous and awesome. Her name is Lauren Watkins, who just released a song called Shirley Temple. Her voice is amazing, and I think she's going to be a big deal. But yeah, I guess I don't really have any favorites. I think like when I think about songs that will be with me my whole life, I think of like Argentine music and like music that reminds me of family.
I apologize for starting the conversation more or less in kind of in an area that I don't necessarily like to start off here with, but I was just curious for a perspective on something that I don't necessarily get to speak with somebody here on
Yeah.
often. And so, I hope that didn't.
Please.
So, okay. Well,
yeah.
that being said, though, it's interesting for me when I'm talking to you now, because I've listened to your conversation before you've had in the past with your cousin and the various other podcasts you've been on as well too. And it's interesting for me to listen to you talk, because when I hear your comedy, it's the person I'm talking to right now, and I hope this doesn't come up the wrong way, but I don't see that in the stand-up, if that makes any sense. And so in other words, I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's a side of you in your comedy that I'm picking up from, that when I'm talking to you, it's I don't see that. What's the best way I could describe it? There's a certain personality that I think I don't necessarily pick up here. Again, I hope it doesn't come off the wrong way, but when I'm talking to you and I listen to your comedy or let's say watch your stand up, there's a distinct personality that I pick up here with you that I don't necessarily connect with your comedy. I'm not sure if I make sense if I'm saying this here, but
yeah, there's layers to people.
Right. That's what I'm trying to say. And I hope, again, when I'm saying this, it doesn't come off the wrong way, but essentially what I'm trying to get here is that listen to you talk and then watching your stand up here, there's a lot that I did connect with you personally, not personally, but to say that I connect with you as far as your story is concerned, and also as far as your comedy is concerned. Because, like for example, there's a joke that you bring up about with Drake, and then the whole thing about Louis C.K. and the whole cancel culture aspect of it as well too, which is why I probably felt really comfortable and wanted to start off the conversation in the beginning with you and starting up asking about your Hispanic background, how things were going, how you was like growing up before you, because there's a subject matter when it deals with cancel culture that nowadays is almost a little taboo. Because I've actually talked to a comedian who I won't say who it is, where when we discuss cancel culture, they were very hesitant to delve into that here because it's a very taboo subject, at least at that time for them. But it's something that I find interesting to learn more about when comedians are delving into that kind of subject matter here. When you talked about with Drake and then the whole thing about the condom, where the girl was trying to sue him for when she found the hot sauce in the condom and whatnot. And then you made the joke about Louis C.K. as well too. And I found that that'd be quite interesting. And it was actually quite funny as well too. But there was also a part of me that's really interested to see how you've also deal with your musical background as well, that you infuse it with your music, which is something we don't see very often nowadays, at least for myself, as far as the kind of stand-up scene is concerned. So there's different aspects about you that I've come to appreciate more and more when I started to listen to your music, and then watching your stand-up as well too, that I'm actually quite excited to see with what you have in store with the comedy album that you're working on here. I'm not sure when the comedy album is expected to be releasing. I'm not sure if you're intending on releasing it later this year. But I know you mentioned before that you intend on releasing the video on your YouTube channel, if I recall correctly, right?
Yep.
So with that being said, though, I'm hoping that if there's anything else you would like to more or less to let people know what to be on the lookout for, apart from the comedy album that they're releasing this year, and then when they could be expecting it, but anything else along the way, because by the time this episode gets uploaded here, it'll probably be in about 2 to 3 weeks time, but around that time frame, if there's anything you can let people know about what to be expecting when it comes to your work and anything else that you are able to share here before we close out.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to speak. And Robert, you ask good questions. I think also when talking to, I mean, like you mentioned, there's different layers and different sides of people. And when I would think most comics, when asked a serious question about like their upbringing in their childhood, would probably show you a different side of themselves than you see on stage, because what's happening on stage are jokes. And also what's happening on comedy reels is oftentimes one small moment that a comic was willing to release to the public without someone seeing them on stage. So oftentimes I'm not going to post some of my like bigger, more important material on a reel because I'm waiting to release that on my special, or this joke needs to be alongside all this other work instead of putting it in a 20-second reel and releasing it to the world. So that's why you probably see a lot of like audience, member involvement from a lot of comedians, because comedians want to hold they don't want people to dissect a 20-second reel or to wonder, what does this mean? And so all that to say that, a lot of things that happen on stage are jokes. Like it's not really meant to reflect on the person saying it as much as you might think. And not to say that I don't agree and reflect on everything that I say on stage, because I do. But it's not all intended to be so serious. That's kind of what I like about comedy, because you getting to know me just for like a little while, you see that I'm not always on. Like I have a very serious, reflective side of me. that needs to be alone and it needs to be learning and growing and working very hard behind the scenes. So it's not all like lollipops and like joking backstage and smoking cigarettes. Like that's not what stand-up is for me or for a lot of people. So it is really fun for people to ask a little bit behind the scene, because it's, like nobody does Q&As after a comedy show and wonders, well, how does my upbringing as an immigrant like reflect in my comedy? And the answer is it doesn't always. It's not always something that everybody gets to see. So for that, I love doing podcasts and love talking to people who ask thoughtful questions, because it's a part of who you are and how you become who you are as a comedian and how you show people your voice. So to answer your question about when my special is coming out, I think the final edits are happening right now, and I'll probably be releasing it. It's definitely happening in 2023, just not exactly sure when. I'm also getting married in a couple months, so this is an exciting summer for me.
On that.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's an exciting summer, and we're going to go on our honeymoon. So I'm thinking maybe it'll be in the fall when I release the album. It might be like September or something like that. But of course, I will be putting all of that out before then, and just hoping to get into more festivals throughout the year. I'll be at the Motor City Comedy Festival in September. I was just at the Rogue Island Comedy Festival in Newport, Rhode Island this past weekend on Memorial Weekend. I'll be at the Rise Comedy Festival in Denver in July. So hoping for more travel opportunities to meet more comics and people and perform all over the country. And that's what I like to do. But yeah, I mean, for people listening, just follow me on Instagram. That's where I'm the most active. I should do more, to your point, Robert. I should do more on YouTube, but, and I will, but it's going to take some time. I'm like, I need to hire people. I can't just like be on the computer all day. It's a lot of work. I know. It's killing me. Yeah.
The struggle is real.
Yeah.
So for the camera, I'm going to say thank you very much for giving me your time. This actually was a lot of fun, and I appreciate you being very candid with me and sharing me your story as well. And I'm hoping that with the career that you're taking out here with your comedy, I hope it does excel, and I really do hope that with your new comedy album that you're releasing, which I'm excited to see on YouTube, because I actually like the visual aspect of it too. I'm curious to see how that also will play itself out, especially considering how you are talking about fine-tuning certain details, cutting the fat out. I'm really curious to see how all that's going to turn out, because it's expected to be a 60-minute set here that you're having.
It'll be around 45
minutes. Okay.
Yep.
So curious to see how that's going to be playing itself out. But until then, I want to say thank you so much, and I would love to have more conversations like these down the line here, especially to help promote the album as well. By the time it gets released, I would love to help any way that I can to help promote that.
Thank you so much.
Too. All right, so
thank you. I appreciate the time.
You're welcome. Well, thank you for your time as well. So for the cameras, cheers to you.